My name is Mark Henderson. I'm 48 years old. Used to be a staff sergeant in the U.S. Marines. Served 3 tours in Afghanistan, held command, and wore that uniform with pride. People used to salute me. Now I sleep in my truck behind a gas station off Highway 12, using my old field jacket as a pillow. I haven't heard my daughter's voice in 3 years, and the last meal I had was a vending machine sandwich from 2 days ago. There are $11 left in my wallet. I counted it 3 times this morning, like maybe I'd missed something, like maybe the bills would multiply if I squinted hard enough. But they didn't. They never do. The truck's running low, again, and if I don't make it to the job interview by 3 p.m. tomorrow, I'll lose the last lead I've got. It's not even a real job. Just a night shift janitor gig in a loading dock. But right now, that sounds like a damn miracle. I used to be somebody. That's what plays in my head when I look at my reflection in the truck's cracked rearview mirror. I see the crow's feet around my eyes, the busted lip that never healed right after that bar fight last winter, the worn-out eyes of a man who's lost too many things to count. I used to be someone people respected, a leader, a fighter, a father, and now, I'm just a guy trying not to cry in the parking lot of a Walgreens. I remember when I first enlisted, that feeling of being part of something bigger than me. The weight of the armor, the way the desert sun bounced off the Humvee's hood, the sound of boots in rhythm. Out there, I had purpose. I had brothers. Out here, all I've got is silence and a truck that leaks power steering fluid. The worst part isn't being broke. It's being forgotten. People walk by me and see nothing. I smile, try to nod, but they look right through me like I'm some ghost haunting the sidewalk. Once, a little boy pointed at me and asked his mom why that man was sleeping in a car. She pulled him close and crossed the street. That stung more than anything I took in combat. This morning, I walked into a plasma donation center. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. $50 for a bag of blood. That's what it's come down to. $50 could mean a tank of gas, a cheap motel shower, maybe even a hot meal if I skipped the soda. I told myself it was just a quick thing, in and out. Sit down, get poked, get paid, leave. But it's not just about the money. It's about doing something, feeling useful. Because when you've gone long enough without being needed, without anyone asking how you are or where you've been, you start to feel like maybe you don't matter anymore. Maybe the world wouldn't notice if you just disappeared into the backseat of a rusted-out Chevy and never came back. I looked around the waiting room. Fluorescent lights buzzing, chairs covered in plastic, a guy in the corner rocking back and forth with a Band-Aid on his elbow. I wondered if he was a vet too. I wondered if he had a daughter he missed or a chest full of medals packed away in a storage unit he can't afford anymore. I wondered if he'd once been somebody like me. The receptionist called my name, and I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. My back ached. I nodded to her like I was reporting for duty. And in a way, I was. Because maybe this was my new mission. Maybe all I had left to give was what was in my veins. Maybe that would be enough to get me 1 more mile down the road. The room smelled like antiseptic and cheap coffee. I sat in the reclining chair, arms stretched out on a vinyl pad, watching the nurse prepare the needle. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes, but still managed a polite smile. I nodded, trying not to let the nerves show. I'd given blood before, back when I had a home and insurance. But this felt different. I wasn't donating out of kindness. I was here for survival. She tied the band around my bicep, tapped my skin, and said it might sting. I braced myself, stared at the ceiling, and tried to slow my breathing. The needle slid in, sharp but not the worst pain I've known. The machine clicked on. A low hum filled the room, steady, mechanical. Then came a beep, a short one at first, followed by a second, louder. Then a long, piercing alarm shot through me like gunfire. The nurse froze. Her eyes darted to the monitor. She whispered something into her headset and called for a supervisor. I asked what was going on, but she didn't answer. 2 more staff members rushed in, whispering fast, one of them pointing at the screen. They pressed buttons, shook their heads, and said something about a code flag. One man leaned over me, pulled the needle out without warning. Blood smeared down my arm. He pressed gauze hard against the vein and told me to stay seated. That's when my chest tightened. My fingers curled into fists. My back went rigid against the chair. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My throat felt like it was closing. Sweat started pouring down the back of my neck. My vision tunneled. All I could hear was the sound of boots and sand, metal on metal, the thump of rotors overhead. I wasn't in the clinic anymore. I was back in Helmand, pinned down behind a half-broken wall, waiting for a blast that never came. A voice broke through. "Ma'am, he's shaking. Get someone now." Another alarm beeped. I flinched. My left leg twitched uncontrollably. My right hand clamped so tight my fingernails cut into my palm. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Just a grunt, a groan. Someone grabbed my shoulder. A woman, older, glasses. Calm voice. She crouched next to me, hand resting lightly on my wrist. "Mark," my name. She knew it. "Mark, you're okay. You're safe." I blinked. My breath came back in ragged bursts. My eyes adjusted to the fluorescent lights again. The walls were still white. The machine was off. My arm throbbed. The nurse looked terrified. A guard stood nearby, not saying a word. The older woman leaned in closer. She wore a lab coat with no name tag. She said she was a doctor, not from the center, from somewhere else. She lowered her voice and said we needed to speak in private. Right away. I nodded. Or maybe I just didn't resist when they helped me up. Everything in me wanted to leave, to get in my truck and drive until the memory disappeared. But her eyes weren't afraid. They were curious, focused, like she just found something rare or dangerous. And I had no idea why. She led me into a small exam room that smelled like latex and lemon wipes. There were no windows, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a folder already waiting for her. She didn't waste time. She sat down, opened the folder, and looked me dead in the eye. Then she said the words that didn't even sound real the first time. "Your blood, Mark. It's Rh-null. Golden blood." I blinked. Rho what? I'd heard of rare types before, AB negative or something. But she shook her head. No, this wasn't just rare. This was nearly extinct. Less than 50 people in the world, she said. 50, and I was one of them. My blood didn't have a single H antigen, which meant it could be given to almost anyone. Universal lifesaver. No wonder the machines freaked out. She leaned forward and said something about the World Health Organization, blood registries, genetic studies. She said my plasma was medically priceless. Then she paused and added that some governments would pay 6 figures just for a pint. That word sat there like a brick. 6 figures. For something inside me I didn't even know existed. I looked down at my arm. The bandage was still fresh. A red dot at the center of white gauze. That thing I'd just given away for $50 was worth more than I'd make in a lifetime. My mouth went dry. I scratched at my beard and asked her if she was joking. She wasn't. She told me someone had already reached out. A private hospital in New York. A high-profile case. Confidential. Urgent. They'd heard about the match. Wanted to fly me out. First class. Full compensation. Whatever I needed. Just say yes. She asked what I thought. I looked at her and laughed. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. I'd just slept in a Walmart parking lot. I hadn't showered in 3 days. My bank account was empty. My boots had duct tape on the soles. And now this stranger was telling me I had something the world desperately wanted. It didn't make sense. I took a breath, leaned back in the chair, and said something that surprised even me. I don't want money. I just need $50 for gas. She stared like I was speaking another language. I wasn't being noble. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I just didn't know how to want more than that right now. She asked again, carefully this time. Are you sure? I nodded. 1 tank. That's all I needed. 1 tank to get me to the interview. 1 tank to get me a chance. Not a handout, Not a fortune, just a small win, something I could earn. There was silence in the room. Then she smiled. Not pity, something else. Like respect. Like she saw me differently now. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, I saw myself differently too. Not as a burden, not as a leftover, but as a man who still had something left to give, something that mattered. They flew me to New York on a private jet. I'd never even been inside a first-class lounge, let alone sat in a leather seat where they bring you steak at 30,000 feet. Everything felt too clean, too quiet, like I was dreaming. They gave me clothes, a prepaid card, and even a hotel room with a view of Central Park. But none of it made sense. I kept waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake, that I didn't belong here, that they'd confused me for someone important. The next morning, a black SUV picked me up. No hospital name on the building, just a steel and glass tower with security tighter than any base I'd ever guarded. They walked me through underground elevators and long, white hallways. No noise, no patience, just silence and soft shoes on polished floors. The woman who'd found me in the donation center was there too. She kept glancing at a tablet and checking her watch. I asked again who I was donating to. She just said it was urgent. Life or death. They led me to a room on the highest floor, ICU. Frosted glass walls, monitors humming softly in rhythm with the beeps of machines. A man lay in the bed, pale, unconscious, hooked up to more wires than I could count. There was something familiar about his face. The strong jaw, the high brow. He looked like me, but older, richer, like a version of me from a life I never got to live. I turned to the doctor and asked who he was. She hesitated. Then she told me. His name was Charles McAllister, defense contractor, billionaire, and my father. I laughed at first. It came out rough, almost bitter. I told her I'd never met my father. She nodded, then told me my mother had been in a relationship with Charles 30 years ago. She'd gotten pregnant, but his family forced him to cut ties, threatened his future, his inheritance, his career. So he left. My mom never told me who he was, just that he didn't want to be found. They'd only figured it out because of the blood, Rh-null. It was genetic. They'd been searching every global registry, every possible match. When my name came up, someone made the connection. My mother's maiden name, a record from a military birth certificate. My existence had been buried in paperwork, but now that he was dying, the past came crawling back. I stood there, staring at the man who gave me life and never looked back. I should have been angry. Maybe I was, but mostly, I felt something else, something quiet. Like everything in my life had been leading to this one strange moment. A man with nothing is asked to save a man who once had everything. The nurse asked if I was ready. I nodded. They took me into the adjacent room, prepped my arm, and hooked up the line. As the blood began to flow, I looked through the glass and watched my father's chest rise and fall. Machines pumped and blinked, but it was my blood that kept him alive. My blood. The same blood I tried to sell for gas money. I didn't do it for the money. They offered it, of course. Blank checks, contracts, future arrangements. But I said no. I told them I wasn't here for that. I was here because, for the first time in years, someone needed me. Not as a favor, not as charity, but as the only one who could make a difference. After the transfusion, I sat alone in a waiting room built like a hotel lobby. No one said much. A few suits passed by and gave me polite nods. One man asked if I'd ever consider working in private security. I didn't answer. I was still processing the fact that the man in that bed had my face. Later that night, one of the doctors pulled me aside. Said Charles was stable, awake. He wanted to see me. I froze. My palms went cold. I hadn't spoken to a parent in years. What would I even say? But I walked into that room anyway. I had to. He looked at me, his eyes watery and weak. He didn't speak right away, just studied me like he was looking for something familiar. Then he whispered, "Thank you. Not just for the blood, for everything. For surviving. For being here. I nodded. Didn't say much. I didn't have to. The silence was enough. In that moment, I wasn't just a veteran or a drifter or a ghost living out of his truck. I was a son, I was a lifeline, and somehow, without trying, I'd become the one thing I thought I'd never be again. Needed. 3 months later, I stood on the front steps of a building that didn't exist before. It was an old community center we rebuilt from the ground up. Faded bricks, a new coat of paint, a flag on the pole out front. The sign above the door said Echo 7 Shelter. That was my old unit. Echo Company, 7th Marines. The name felt right, like a message from the past echoing forward into something that mattered again. I used the inheritance money to start it, not all of it. Just enough to get the roof fixed, the kitchen working, a few cots lined up for the nights when the world turns cold and no one has a place to go. We offer hot meals, clean showers, job leads, and one-on-one support for veterans who slip through the cracks. Because I know what it's like to fall. And I know what it means to have someone reach down and say, I see you, you still matter. It started small, just 6 beds and some donated blankets. But word got around fast. A guy with golden blood, some said. Others just called me that vet who got lucky. But it was never about luck. It was about purpose. I wake up now with something to do, people to help. Brothers and sisters I never knew I had, walking through that door every day with heavy bags and heavier stories. And we listen. That's the first step. Just listening. One afternoon, my mom showed up. She stood at the gate, holding a photo of me in uniform. Her hair had gone gray, her hands a little more fragile. But the way she said my name sounded the same. We hugged for a long time. Didn't say much. Didn't need to. She told me she'd never stopped looking. That she always knew one day I'd find my way back. And in a way, she had too. A week later, my daughter came. I hadn't seen her since she was 9. Now she was taller, voice deeper, carrying her own kind of strength. She'd heard about the center on the news. They said her dad was a hero. I didn't feel like one, but when she took my hand and said she was proud, I started to believe maybe I could be again. There's a bench out back where I sit sometimes after the work is done. It faces a small garden that the guys planted last spring. Nothing fancy. Just sunflowers, tomatoes, and a few stubborn herbs that refuse to die. But that spot reminds me how far we've come. How far I've come. From the edge of giving up to building something worth holding on to. Some nights, I walk the halls just to hear the quiet breathing of men who finally have a bed. Some mornings I make coffee at 5 a.m. because I know what it's like to be awake with no one around. Every detail matters. Every choice we make is to be kind, to remember, to keep each other going. I still carry the weight of the years I lost. The ones spent on cold asphalt with no destination. But they're not empty anymore. They're part of the story. Part of why Echo 7 exists. Because every broken step still led me here. People ask if I'll ever go back to the battlefield. I tell them I never left it. The real war starts when you come home. And winning it means turning pain into purpose, blood into shelter, ghosts into neighbors. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but I am needed. And for a man who once thought he had nothing left to give, that's more than enough.